Welcome to Soul Care with Stevie Boy, episode 28. Uh, You probably get a little tired of me saying it, but I am not tired of saying how grateful I am that you give up valuable time to join me and look into the book of Philippians for the sake of soul care. We're in chapter 2, and we've made a good bit of progress. We're gonna drop back just a teeny bit to what we looked at last episode about a guy named Epaphroditus. If you're looking for a name for your dog, I think Epaphroditus is a great name. Nobody on your block or cul-de-sac is gonna be getting their dog confused with your dog's name, and so there you go. Just an added value tip there. Epaphroditus. Epaphroditus was a Philippian, and the church there in Philippi had sent him to Rome. He had found Paul, and although it's not stated here in the text, you don't have to use your imagination very much to figure out that when Epaphroditus got to Rome, he may have had to search for the Apostle Paul. Because in this imprisonment, it's our belief that he was not in the central prison, he was under house arrest. There were many houses in Rome, and so Epaphroditus, though, found him. He was there as a carrier or a bearer of financial blessing for Paul in the way of cash support. He was also there to stand in the gap for the Philippians. Paul said he was a brother, he was a fellow servant, he was a fellow soldier, and in fact, he almost died in this act of service on behalf of the Philippians. Let's pick it up in verse 29, where Paul has told them that he's sending Epaphroditus back to them and that they are to welcome him like a hero because he is a hero. And in verse 29, he says, "So then, welcome him in the Lord with great joy and honor people like him, because he almost died for the work of Christ. He risked his life to make up for the help you yourselves could not give me." My wife and I work with an organization called Open Door Libraries. We have 3 libraries foreign to the United States, one in Germany, one in Prague, the Czech Republic, and one in the Middle East. All 3 of these libraries are located in areas that have previously been either unresourced or under-resourced in terms of Christian literature and books and information. Well, our role is to give care, spiritual care, emotional care to the people on the field rather than waiting for them to crack up, bringing them home, trying to patch them back up so they might perhaps go back out on the field. In a way, we're a little bit like Epaphroditus. I can tell you that in all 3 of those locations, there are difficulties. There is culturally, I wouldn't say there's any persecution. There are some hindrances and some barricades against Christianity and Christ and Christ followers, but nothing, it's not like Eastern Turkey. It is, though, a bit restrictive in some cases, more so than what it is in the U.S. So anyway, we give care on location with these folks that are on the field doing the work. I do not consider us these tremendous heroic things. It's not heroic for us to make these trips 2 or 3 times a year when the airlines are up and operating and airports open in these places. I do, though, know from my firsthand experience how much it matters and how useful it is to people on the field to hear and have a live body to remind them that they're thought of, they're cared about, and prayed for, supported. In a way, it's opened both of our eyes to how there's a almost silent need among missionaries for emotional and spiritual support. The financial support is obvious. They can't do their work and earn a living in order to do their work. The two are mutually exclusive in these settings. Most missionaries are going to find it very difficult to generate income to support themselves and their family and their work. And so they depend on the support of those of us who are sending them. I think that's a reasonable model, and that's a little bit the model that Paul was working with at the time that he wrote the Philippians. He, as a tent maker, in certain periods of his ministry life, he supported himself. Now, today's term for that is bivocational. Well, he was unable to support himself while under house arrest, and so he depended on the generosity of the church that he had supported, encouraged, and established. Where I'm going with all this is my wife and I have always had a high value for missionaries. I grew up in a preacher's home, and we had missionaries in and out of our home all the time. And some of my parents' dearest friends were missionaries. And so the idea of the nobility, the elevated status of the work of a missionary was nothing new to me. But I had never been that closely connected on the field with missionaries to realize that their needs don't go away. They need the encouragement and the input and the love and the care of face-to-face encounters. And that's a difficult thing to do when there are many thousands of miles separating them from us. Even today, we use this technology to connect with our folks in these 3 remote locations, but it's not like being there over a cup of coffee or a glass of iced tea, a meal at a restaurant that they wouldn't be able to normally go to. It's not the same. It's good, but it's not the same. Can you imagine? Let's just roll it back 15 years. This was not possible. This technology did not exist broadly 15 years ago, 20 years ago, 30, 50 years ago. My sister, 4 years older than me, did a 1-year internship in South Africa after she graduated from Bible college. And I remember that it took a week for letters to get from there to here using airmail. And I remember that we, maybe 2 or 3 times during the time she was there, we made long distance calls. They were very expensive and difficult. Imagine in century 1, distance made such a difference. It complicated things so dramatically. I guess what I'm saying is, don't take for granted that your missionaries are just hanging in there. And they're good people. And as long as we keep, we don't want to let down on the financial commitment. Although this breaks my heart, but there are churches who get to a point where they realize, well, we don't have the income we used to have, or that we projected we would have, or that we had hoped we would have, or that we committed to give our mission giving out of. So we're going to have to cut back. And so they just cut back and send a letter and say, oh, you'll notice we've cut back. To me, that's unconscionable. Yes, if things happen, we've got to have the dignity and responsibility to say, we're experiencing a difficulty and we hate it, but our next check or 2 checks from now, 3 checks from now will be reduced by this amount because of the issues that we're facing here. And we trust God to help us and to help you. It's a tough balance, I get it, but it burns my britches that there are churches who they think of their missionaries as maybe pieces on a chessboard. They move them about and they don't even realize the impact that, well, okay. Wow, I didn't mean to get on a hobby horse. I just meant to say what Paul said about Epaphroditus, I would want to be said about me, and I think you would want it said about you, that we risk our lives to make up for the help you yourselves could not give. There are things that you and I can do here without having to cross the ocean or cross a border or cross the street. And the big one is to pray. I know it seems like a Sunday school answer, but every day, would it not be a great idea to pick out a missionary supported by your congregation, the family where you worship, and learn a little about them? And even before you learn very much about them, you can begin praying for them. I can tell you some things that every missionary needs. Every missionary needs, first of all, they need health. It seems like that would be an interest of maybe not the biggest thing. I'll tell you this, though. Well, think about Epaphroditus. He nearly died while offering service and doing for Paul what the Philippians couldn't do for him. And that would have been a tremendous loss had he died. Paul seemed to elevate his physical health on the list of priorities, I would say, for their health. Physical health. In many cases, missionaries are serving in parts of the world where disease is not as mitigated as it is here at home. Second thing, obviously, their financial health. And this goes in 2 ways. Number one, that God's people, that generous hearts would be stimulated, would be prompted to give generously in terms of finances. And secondly, that those finances would go to work and do more. I know this sounds silly, but that they would do more than that amount of dollars should normally do as an act of God's supernatural mercy and grace. When a missionary has dozens of supporters and one supporter drops out, this can be because of something as simple as, this happened to us. One of our missions that we personally support, we had put on our automatic pay and our banking changed a little bit, and we didn't even realize it, but for 6 months they didn't get anything from us. And granted, it wasn't much, but it had an impact. When a, I'm going to call it a giving unit, goes away, it has an impact. Even if it's a tiny amount, it has an impact. So pray that God would sustain the aggregate, the bigger sum for the missionaries that you care about, for their health, for their finances. And then one big thing is for the health of their relationship. If they're married, their marriage is always at risk. By the way, if you didn't get the memo, your marriage is always at risk because you have an enemy who wants to tear it apart. So pray for their marriage and their other relationships. And then pray for their impact, that God would open doors so that through their relationships and through their work, through the encounter of their life on another, that the gospel can go forth. And then ask God to bring needs into your awareness to pray for them. It's been all about the application of thinking about, caring for, praying for missionaries today. And I don't feel a bit bad about that. So there you go. That's what I got. And I hope I get to see you next time on Soul Care with Stevie Boy.